The phone rings, sharp and metallic, cutting through the silence of my living room like a blade. I fumble with it, the receiver cold against my palm, my knuckles white as I press it to my ear. Mrs. Margaret Taylor, the voice on the other end is flat, businesslike. This is First National Bank. We're calling regarding your account. Your credit card is showing an overdue balance of $500. Will you be making a payment today? For a second, I can't breathe. The number slams against my chest like a hammer. $500. I live on a pension and a few scarves I sell online. 500 might as well be 5,000. There must be a mistake, I stammer, my throat dry. My voice a cracked whisper. But the woman on the phone rattles off details I know too well. My card number, the charges made at a gaming platform I've never touched. My vision blurs. The room seems to tilt. My chair scrapes against the wooden floor as I stand, gripping the edge of the table for balance. Gaming. I don't play games. But Thomas, a sick realization coils in my stomach. I hang up, my hands trembling so badly the phone almost slips. I dial his number. 1, ring. 2, he picks up. Thomas, I manage, my voice shaking. Did you use my card? There's a pause and then a careless laugh. It's just a game, Grandma. Don't make such a big deal. The words slice through me sharper than any knife. My breath catches. I can almost hear my own heartbeat pounding against my ribs. Just a game, I whisper, my voice breaking. $500, Thomas. That's more than my groceries for 2 months. He sighs, impatient, as if I'm the one being unreasonable. You'll figure it out. You always do. I close my eyes. Darkness presses in. The walls feel closer, the ticking clock louder, the air heavier. For years, I bent, stretched, and broken myself to give this family everything I had left. And now I'm nothing more than a bottomless pocket. The phone grows heavier, slipping in my damp grip until it feels like 1,000 pounds of iron. The phone in my hand weighed like 1,000 pounds, but heavier still was the feeling of being betrayed by my own blood. After I hung up the phone that day, my mind slipped backward, as it so often does, into the long corridor of years I thought I had left behind. When my husband, Richard, died suddenly of a heart attack, I was 54. The house felt cavernous without his laugh, the evenings unbearably still. But there was no time to collapse. My son, Daniel, had just lost his job at the auto shop. His wife, Claire, was pregnant with Thomas. Bills piled up on their kitchen counter like bricks, threatening to bury them alive. So I did what I thought any mother, any grandmother would do. I stepped in. I took a part-time job as a secretary at the community college, typing up transcripts for professors, filing endless stacks of paper. My pension was modest, barely enough for one person, let alone 3 more. Still, every month without fail, I transferred $300 to Daniel's account. Month after month, year after year, until 8 full years had bled into the next. By the end, that was nearly $30,000 gone quietly, without a single thank you that I can remember. And it wasn't just the allowance. When Thomas started school, I covered the cost of his tuition, $20,000 in total, scraped together from my savings, my overtime pay, and the coins I slipped into a jar on the kitchen shelf. I still remember the weight of those envelopes, stuffed with crumpled bills, handed over with a smile. Clothes, too. Shoes that wore out as quickly as he outgrew them. Groceries when their fridge was empty. Christmas gifts when Daniel insisted he couldn't afford them. Each time I told myself it was just this once, that things would get better, that my sacrifices would help them stand on their own. And always there was the knitting. I'd sit by the window in the evenings, the needles clinking rhythmically, as though each stitch could hold the family together. I knitted blankets for their beds, mittens for the winters, and scarves that wound around their necks like the love I thought would protect them. My favorite was a deep blue shawl, soft and warm, which I draped around Claire's shoulders when she was recovering after childbirth. She smiled then, but it never reached her eyes. That shawl, how naive I was, became something else in my memory. Not a thread of comfort, but a tether, binding me to obligations that grew heavier with each passing year. Sometimes, in the middle of a family dinner, Claire's voice would cut through the chatter with a remark that stung, though she always wore a smile when she said it. "Mother, you're getting older," she'd remark, pouring herself more wine. "Why bother clinging to money? What use is it sitting in an account when the family needs it?" At first, I laughed it off, pretending she meant no harm. But deep down, a shiver ran through me. I brushed it away, told myself I was imagining things. Yet her words lingered, an echo that grew louder with every request for another check, another loan. Looking back now, I wonder why I never stopped, why I never drew a line. Was it guilt? Was it love? Or was it fear that if I stopped giving, they'd stop coming around? I used to whisper to myself in the quiet hours of the night, why do I believe love has to be unconditional? Why do I think giving endlessly will keep them close? The truth, sharp and bitter, comes only now, years later. I thought I was nurturing a family, but in reality, I was only feeding a habit of dependence. The glow of the computer screen washed over my face, casting everything in a cold, bluish light. It was past midnight, the house silent except for the faint hum of the heater. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as the banking page blinked back at me. The transfer amount sat there mocking me, $200. Another request, another promise that it was the last time. Another hole dug in the ground of my dwindling savings. I stared at the numbers until they blurred. My vision fogged, not because of age, but because my eyes brimmed with tears. One dropped, landing squarely on the confirm transfer button. It splattered, a small, perfect circle on the glowing glass. My chest heaved, my throat tightened as if someone were pressing their hands against it. If I keep doing this, what will I lose? The question rose in my head like a shout in an empty hall. Money? Of course. Health? Yes, I feel it draining me with every sleepless night. But worse, my dignity, my self-respect, my name. Am I nothing but a pipeline, a machine that spits out dollars on command? Taller. The cursor blinked, waiting, impatient, as though daring me to obey. And then something inside me, something that had been silent for two, long snapped awake. My trembling hand slid the mouse to the side, not forward. Instead of clicking confirm, I clicked cancel. The screen refreshed, returning to the blank transfer page. It was gone. The transaction erased before it could chain me one link deeper into this prison. I leaned back, pressing both hands to my face. My fingers were shaking so violently I could feel the dampness of my tears spreading across my palms. But beneath the trembling, there was something else. A spark, a strange lightness in my chest, as though someone had cut loose a weight I had been carrying for decades. I stumbled toward the bathroom. The mirror greeted me with a pale, tear-streaked woman I barely recognized. Her silver hair clung to her temples. Her eyes were swollen, bloodshot, but she was still me. I pressed both hands against the sink, leaned in close, and whispered to my own reflection. "Margaret," I said, the name foreign on my tongue, as though I were meeting myself for the first time in years. "You are a person, not a crying wallet. Not a purse with a pulse." The woman in the mirror stared back, silent, but I swore I saw a flicker in her eyes, a faint spark of defiance. For a long time, I just stood there, letting the silence wrap around me. No demands, no buzzing phone, no hands reaching out for more. Just me, breathing, trembling, alive. I walked back to the living room and turned off the computer. The screen went black, and in its reflection, I saw my face again, smaller, but steadier. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without the crushing weight of guilt pressing against my ribs. And in the morning, when I woke, The air felt different, fresher somehow, as if even the walls of the house recognized what I had done. That was the day I chose to stand on my own side. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon, heavy and impatient, rattling the old brass handle on my front door. I already knew who it was before I opened it. My stomach tightened and my palms grew damp. When I pulled the door open, Daniel stood there, broad-shouldered and stiff, with Claire just a half step behind him. They smiled, too wide, two bright like actors reciting lines in a play they didn't believe in. "Mom," Daniel said warmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Claire followed, carrying a leather folder pressed tightly to her chest. The living room filled with their presence, their voices bouncing off the walls. I could hear the old clock on the mantel tick, tick, ticking, each second slicing the silence thinner. "We're worried about you," Claire began, her voice smooth as honey. "Handling bills at your age, dealing with banks, all that stress, it isn't good for you." I sat down in my armchair, gripping the armrest. "I manage," I said. My tone was flat, not inviting. Claire leaned forward, sliding the folder onto the coffee table. Her manicured nails tapped the edge. "That's why we thought it would be best if you signed a simple power of attorney. Nothing complicated, just your signature here, and Daniel and I will take care of everything. You won't have to lift a finger again." The words struck like cold water. I stared at the folder. The papers inside neat and crisp, their black ink lines waiting like traps. "I don't need anyone to take care of me," I replied, my voice sharper now. "What I need is respect." Claire's smile faltered. Daniel shifted, crossing his arms, his jaw tightening. "Mom," he said, his voice lowering, "why make this difficult? We're only trying to help." The lamp above us flickered, buzzing faintly, throwing shadows across their faces. My heart drummed against my ribs. I could feel the old fear rising, the familiar urge to give in, to make peace, to stay silent. But something in me held steady this time. Claire sighed dramatically, then snapped the folder open. She pulled out the papers and, with a swift flick, tossed them onto the coffee table in front of me. The sharp slap of paper against wood echoed in the room. "Sign it," she said, her sweetness gone now, replaced with steel. "Or Thomas won't be allowed to visit anymore. You wouldn't want that, would you? A grandmother without her grandson?" Her words sliced through me. For a moment, my throat closed and tears threatened. Thomas, my sweet boy, the child I had once rocked to sleep, the one whose first bicycle I had bought, whose mittens I had knitted. The image of his face flashed before me, innocent once, though lately more distant, shaped by the contempt of his parents. But beneath the ache, a fire burned. I leaned forward, placing both hands on the papers, not to sign them, but to shove them back across the table. The pages slid against the polished surface and landed near Claire's lap. "No," I said. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled. Daniel's eyes widened, then narrowed. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no," I repeated, louder this time. The clock ticked behind me, each beat a drum to my words. "I am not signing away my life. I am not handing over my dignity. Not for you, not for anyone." Claire's lips curled. "You're being ridiculous, stubborn. Do you want to die alone, penniless, with no one left to take care of you?" I rose from my chair, my knees aching but my spine straighter than it had been in years. I'd rather die poor and free than rich and chained. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. I could hear the faint buzz of the lamp, the tick of the clock, even the sound of my own breath. Daniel took a step closer, his face flushed. "After everything we've done for you." I cut him off, my hand raised. "Enough. What you've done is take, not give. For years, I gave you money, time, love. I held this family together with my bare hands and these old needles." My voice cracked, but I didn't falter. "And all you saw in me was a wallet that never closed." Their faces hardened, but I no longer cared. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing. I am no longer the family's safe deposit box, I declared, my voice ringing through the room. I am Margaret, and I say no. The words hung in the air, solid and undeniable. Claire snatched up the papers, her jaw tight, and stormed toward the door. Daniel lingered a second longer, staring at me as though I were a stranger. Then he turned, following his wife out into the fading afternoon. The door slammed shut. The lamp flickered once more before steadying. The clock ticked on. My hands still trembled, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from the sheer power of having spoken the truth. For the first time in years, my house felt like mine again. The envelope arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning, tucked neatly in my mailbox as though it were nothing more than a grocery flyer. But the weight of it in my hand told me otherwise. The paper inside smelled faintly of ink and something sour, fear perhaps, or betrayal. I tore it open with shaking fingers. What I saw made the room tilt, a power of attorney document. My name printed clearly, my signature sprawled at the bottom in thick black strokes, but it wasn't my hand. The curve of the M was wrong. The tail of the TE looped where mine never did. My stomach churned. Someone had forged my name. I sat down hard at the kitchen table, the envelope slipping to the floor. For minutes, maybe hours, I just stared. My mind replayed the confrontation from the week before. Claire's voice sharp as a blade. Sign it or Thomas won't see you again. And now here it was, signed without me. A tremor shook through me. My son, my daughter-in-law, my own family had crossed a line so dark, so irreversible, it left me breathless. They weren't asking anymore. They were taking. By afternoon, a formal letter followed. If I didn't comply, they would bring the matter to court. Court. The word was a stone dropping into my chest. I was a 69-year-old widow living on a pension. They had lawyers, money, confidence. I had yarn and needles. The soft click of knitting that used to soothe me but now felt like the only thread holding me together. For 2 days, I moved through the house like a ghost. I didn't eat. I barely slept. The rain outside didn't stop, drumming against the windows like a relentless reminder. It was Rosa who saved me from drowning in that silence. She lived next door, a woman with wild gray curls and an apron that always smelled of cinnamon. That Thursday, she knocked on my door, balancing a tray of sweet rolls still warm from her oven. Margaret, she said, her voice gentle, her eyes scanning my face. You look pale. What's wrong? I broke. I told her everything, the forged document, the threats, the looming court case. My words tumbled out, ragged and raw, and when I finally stopped, Rosa set down the tray and took my hands in hers. You are not alone, she said firmly. You hear me? You are not alone in this. Her hands were warm, her grip steady, an anchor in a storm I thought would sweep me away. Tears blurred my vision. Later that evening, as I sat knitting a scarf, my needles clicking softly, almost like a heartbeat, I felt her presence in the room. Rosa sipped tea beside me, humming under her breath. For the first time in days, the house didn't feel so heavy. It was Rosa who insisted we call David. He was a young lawyer she knew from her church, barely in his 30s, with sharp eyes and a sharper mind. When he arrived the next day, briefcase in hand, I half expected him to laugh at me, to tell me it was hopeless. But he didn't. Instead, he spread the forged papers across my table, examined them under the lamp, and nodded. This signature is fake. Anyone trained will see it. He looked at me directly. Mrs. Taylor, you have a case, and you have me. For the first time, a spark of hope flickered. Still, doubt clawed at me. They're my family, I whispered. How do you fight your own family? David's expression softened, but his words were steady. Sometimes, protecting yourself means standing up, even if it's against the people you love. The law is on your side. That night, I sat again with my knitting, the yarn slipping between my fingers, stitch after stitch. Each loop felt like a prayer, a promise to myself that I wouldn't crumble. Rosa poured me tea and nudged the plate of sweet rolls closer. You're stronger than you think, she told me. Don't let them convince you otherwise. The clock ticked softly on the wall, the lamplight warm against the dark. For the first time since the nightmare began, I felt something other than fear. I felt resolve, because the truth had finally cut clear through the haze. I realized wolves don't always come from the forest. Sometimes they wear the faces of family. It happened by accident, the way most truths do. I was folding laundry one chilly evening when Thomas came rushing in from outside, tossing his jacket across the back of the chair. I picked it up, shaking out the dust and leaves, and a folded paper slipped from the inner pocket, fluttering to the floor like a guilty secret. I bent down, curiosity outweighing hesitation, and unfolded it. My eyes caught the familiar letterhead, the same legal formatting I had seen in the forged envelope weeks earlier. But what froze my blood was the signature at the bottom, my name, bent and twisted into strokes I had never written. For a long second, I couldn't move. My hands shook so hard the paper rattled like dry leaves. My pulse hammered in my ears, drowning out everything else. My knees felt weak, yet my vision sharpened with a startling clarity. I had suspected Claire, but to find the evidence here in Thomas's jacket was like a blade driven straight through my chest. Thomas appeared in the doorway, earbuds dangling, his face flushed from the cold. Grandma, have you seen my? He froze when he saw the paper in my hand. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I looked at him, my voice trembling. Where did you get this? He shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting away. It's nothing, just Mom asked me to hold on to it. Nothing? My tone cracked like a whip. This is my name, my life, forged like a cheap receipt. Thomas swallowed hard, guilt flickering across his face before he turned and bolted upstairs, leaving me alone with the damning evidence trembling in my grasp. I pressed the paper flat against the table, my heart still pounding. My breath came in ragged bursts, but my eyes burned with a strange light fear mixed with fury. The next morning, I carried it straight to David's office. The young lawyer studied the photocopy under a desk lamp, his brow furrowed. He compared it to my driver's license, to notes I scribbled right there in front of him. Then he looked up, his expression grim but certain. This is a forgery, he said firmly. With this, we have proof. They crossed the line into fraud. I sat back, the weight of his words pressing into me. Fraud, crime, not just family drama anymore, but something that could stand in a courtroom. My voice was quiet but steady. When I saw that forged signature, I knew. This was no longer about money. This was about dignity. The weeks before the hearing blurred into a frenzy of paper, ink, and sleepless nights. My dining table became a fortress of evidence. Bank statements stacked in neat piles, photocopies of checks, screenshots of messages, even a small black notebook where I had logged every transaction, every request, every sigh-filled phone call. David guided me patiently, his tone calm but unwavering. Documentation is power. Every day, every dollar, it tells your story. At night, when exhaustion threatened to smother me, I stood before the mirror in my bedroom rehearsing my statement. At first, my voice shook so badly the words tangled. I could hardly meet my own eyes. My name is Margaret Taylor, I whispered, then faltered, cheeks burning though no one was watching. My reflection seemed small, brittle, a woman beaten down by years of giving. But night after night, I tried again. I spoke louder, clearer. I lifted my chin. Slowly, the woman in the mirror transformed. Her shoulders straightened. Her voice no longer cracked. She began to believe herself. Rosa often dropped by, carrying fresh bread or just her quiet company. One evening, she placed both hands on my shoulders, steadying me in front of the glass. Margaret, you've spent your life raising everyone else. Now it's time to raise yourself. Her words struck deep. I turned back to the mirror, speaking louder this time. I am Margaret Taylor. I am here to protect what is mine. I am not ashamed to say I deserve respect. The sound of my own conviction startled me. My heart raced, not from fear, but from pride. On the night before the trial, Rosa, David, and two other friends gathered in my kitchen. The air smelled of tea and cinnamon. They raised their cups toward me, their eyes warm. "You've fed this family for years," Rosa said softly. "Now it's time to feed yourself. You've carried them. Now carry your own name." For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for agreeing. For the first time in 69 years. I practiced saying and I did not feel guilty. The courthouse air is the kind that sneaks into your bones, cold, clean, a little too bright. Fluorescent light drains color from everything, leaving faces pale and paper thin. Shoe heels strike the linoleum in an impatient rhythm, clack, 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 until the bailiff's bark snaps the noise into silence. I stand when everyone stands. All rise. The judge enters with the slow, ceremonial gravity of someone who has seen every kind of lie and still believes the truth can be coaxed from the mess. I bind my fingers together to stop them shaking. Beside me, David leans in slightly. "You're okay," he whispers. "Breathe on the count of 4. I inhale, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, and catch the scent of polish and paper. On the other side of the aisle, Daniel and Claire sit shoulder to shoulder, a united front. Claire's hair is sleek as a blade. Daniel's jaw works. Hard gum, hard anger. A leather folder lies between them like a weapon. The judge settles. "Be seated." The room exhales at once. A congregation of lungs. I lower myself into the chair and feel the edge of the wooden bench. Pressed through my skirt, too straight, too honest to forgive bad posture or bad faith. Opposing counsel rises first. Leary, mid-40s, navy suit so sharp, it might cut you if you brushed against him. He smiles at the court reporter, then at the judge, a polished gleam. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter," he begins. "Mrs. Taylor." He turns to me and gives a soft, sympathetic tilt of the head, has reached an age where managing finances is burdensome. The family, out of concern, sought to assist her. We submit that she requested and later confirmed a power of attorney. We have documents reflecting that intent. He spreads his hands. This is about care, not conflict. Care. The word lands on my tongue like a bitter pill. David stands smoothly. "Your Honor, this is not care. This is coercion. We intend to show that the power of attorney was forged, that my client's funds have been targeted for unlawful control, and that the so-called cares is a story told to disguise financial abuse." The judge nods once, brisk. "Then let's proceed." Plaintiff's case. Leary calls Claire to the stand. I feel my chest pinch as she passes me, perfume like cool linen. She is sworn in, settles, crosses her ankles with careful poise. "Claire," Leary says, "describe your relationship with your mother-in-law." "A close," she says sweetly. "We speak often. Margaret, Mrs. Taylor has always relied on us for help with bills, with doctors, with her online accounts. She's generous, but sometimes forgetful." Forgetful. I flinch. David's hand touches the table, a quiet signal, hold. "And the power of attorney," Leary prompts. "She asked us to prepare it," Claire replies. She said, "It's getting too much for me. So I did the paperwork, we discussed it, and she signed. Did you witness the signature?" "Yes," Claire says, eyes innocently wide. "At our kitchen table." "Thank you," Leary says, and clasps his hands as if he's just heard a lullaby. No further questions. David rises, slides a thin folder from our stack. His voice is even and low enough to make the room lean in. Mrs. Daniels, he begins, using her married name, formal and cool. You say Margaret signed this document at your kitchen table. On what date? Claire blinks. It was a Saturday. The date, please. March 10th. Morning or afternoon? Afternoon, she says. And your son Thomas, was he at home? I believe so. Good, David says, and lays down a printed screenshot. This is a message sent from your phone to my client at 3014 p.m. on March 10th. Please transfer 200 by tonight. It's urgent. You sent this while, according to your testimony, Margaret was at your kitchen table signing a document giving you control over her finances. Claire's smile tightens. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. David nods slightly. Of course. One more detail. You claim you witnessed her signature at your kitchen table. Would you read the address listed on the document's notary block? She glances down. It says Easton Road. Is that your address? No, she answers, slower now. And is there any notary stamp present? No, she admits, eyes flickering. Thank you, David says. No further questions. Claire's mouth presses into a careful line as she steps down. Daniel is called next. He swears in, shoulders squared, that stubborn tilt of his chin inherited from no one I recognize. Daniel, Leary says, did your mother tell you she wanted help with money? Yes, he says. She said she was tired. She asked us to handle things. Did she object to the document? No. Leary smiles at the judge like this is going splendidly. Nothing further. David is up again. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Mr. Daniels, do you recall visiting your mother the Sunday after? March 10th. Yes. And do you recall bringing a folder with documents and telling her to sign, or her grandson would not be permitted to see her? He bristles. No. David lifts a small recorder. Your Honor, with the court's permission, we'd like to play an excerpt from a voicemail Mr. Simmel Daniels left my client that evening. Leary starts to object. The judge lifts a hand. Overruled. Let's hear it. The bailiff takes the device, presses play. The courtroom is suddenly filled with Daniel's voice. My son's voice, strained, low, angry. Mom, sign the papers. Claire says it's the fastest way. Don't make this ugly. If you keep dragging your feet, Thomas won't come around for a while, okay? Think about that. Something inside me cracks, not like ice, but like a shell that's outgrown itself. Murmurs flicker through the room. The judge's face doesn't change, but her pen stops moving. David's tone stays polite. No further questions. No further questions. Daniel steps down, avoiding my eyes. I feel Rosa behind me somewhere, hands knitted together in her lap, prayer carved into her fingers. Leary calls no one else. He doesn't need to. His narrative is a soft blanket he hopes will smother the jagged corners. He sits. David stands, and the room reorients around him, patient, methodical, light gathering in small, deliberate ways. The defense calls Ms. Calls. Ms. Vermees Astor and Ander Earl, Rosa Alvarez. Rosa's steps are quiet as rain. She is sworn in and looks small in the witness chair, but the light finds her eyes and makes them shine. Ms. Alvarez, David says, how long have you known Mrs. Sempersea? Taylor? Nearly 20 years, she replies. We share a backyard fence. I see her most days. Did you ever witness her being pressured about her finances? Yes. Rosa folds her hands. I was at Margaret's house when her daughter-in-law came by with a folder. She spoke sweetly at first, then changed. She told Margaret to sign or she wouldn't see her grandson. Did Margaret sign? No, Rosa says, and her voice steadying makes me steadier. She said no. Thank you, David says. Nothing further. Leary doesn't cross-examine. He pretends there's nothing there to pick at, but the corner of his mouth pulls. David calls the next witness, Ms. Patel. A woman in a crisp blazer walks to the stand, the measured confidence of someone who has learned to make facts louder than opinions. She is sworn in. Please state your occupation. I'm a branch manager at First National Bank. Did you review Mrs. Taylor's account activity for the month of March? Yes. Any unusual transactions? Several online gaming purchases, she says. We also noted a login attempt from an IP address associated with Mr. Daniels's household. Additionally, we reviewed signature cards on file for Mrs. Probble Taylor. David nods. I'm showing you what's been pre-marked as Defense Exhibit C. Do you recognize this? Yes. It's a photocopy of the power of attorney presented to the bank. And did you compare the signature on Exhibit C to the bank's? Authenticated signature card for Mrs. Taylor? I did. Your conclusion? They do not match Mrs. C's. Patel says. The formation of the letters, the slant, the pressure, there are consistent discrepancies. Thank you. David steps back. No further questions. Leary tries to rattle her. Signatures can vary with age and fatigue, can't they? Yes, Ms. Patel says calmly, but not in the systemic ways present here. These are characteristic differences, not natural variation. He gives up after a few more questions that fall like dull stones. Defense calls Thomas Taylor, David says quietly. My breath stumbles. Thomas. He walks to the stand with that teenage slouch that looks like nonchalance but feels like armor. He is sworn in, eyes flicking everywhere but my face. Thomas, David begins, do you recognize this jacket? He lifts a clear evidence bag. Thomas nods. Yeah, it's mine. Was this photocopied? David holds up a paper found in the inner pocket. Thomas swallows. Yes. Did your mother give you that document? He hesitates, glances toward Claire, then to the judge, then at his shoes. She told me to hold on to it. Said Grandma might change her mind and we'd need it. Did your grandmother ever sign documents in your presence? No. Did you ever hear your mother or father tell your grandmother she wouldn't see you if she didn't sign? A heartbeat. 2. Yes. Thank you, Thomas, David says, voice gentler now. No further questions. Leary doesn't cross. Thomas steps down quickly, a flush climbing his neck. David looks at me. Your Honor, the defense calls Margaret Taylor. My knees quake as I take the oath. The wood of the witness chair is cool against my palms. David smiles with his eyes only. Mrs. Taylor, he says, how old are you? 69. Where do you live? In a small house I've kept since my husband died. What do you do? I almost laugh. It comes out as a breath. I knit, I say. I sell some of it online. I make do. He nods. Did you sign a power of attorney granting your son and daughter-in-law control over your finances? No. Did you at any point agree to sign one? No. I was asked. I refused. He steps aside a little, giving me room inside my own story. Mrs. Taylor, how have you supported your family over the years? I look out over the room, past Daniel's shuttered face, past Claire's studied stillness. The truth rises, tidal and clear. I've sent my son money every month for 8 years, I say, voice steadier than I feel. $300. I paid for my grandson's school, $20,000. Groceries, shoes, Christmas. I stitched blankets when their heat was cut off. I fed them from a pension and a pair of old hands that never asked for anything back. The courtroom is very quiet. And why are you here today? David asks. My mouth is dry, but the words are water. Because they wanted more, I say. Because when I said no, they tried to take it anyway. Because I found my name twisted on a paper I never touched. And because, I swallow, because I would rather be alone and poor than watched over like a harvest. David gives the smallest nod. One final question. In your own words, please. I gather myself, stitch by stitch, breath by breath. I reach for the place in me that still remembers softness and the place that learns steel. I used to keep this family warm with every stitch I made, I say. and see Rosa's hands clutched together in my periphery. I raised them on a lacework of leftovers and the scraping of my savings. I fed them on every loop of yarn, every penny of a widow's check. I lift my chin. But today, I choose to feed my dignity. The judge watches me with a face that doesn't show much, but something in the room loosens, like a belt notch let out after a long, breathless meal. David says, "No further questions," and I step down, legs unsteady, heart mercilessly alive. Leary gives a closing no one will remember, concern, care, confusion, he says. Misunderstanding, streamlining, efficiency. He talks like a brochure. David stands last. He doesn't pace. He doesn't point. He lays out the pieces as if he's setting a table. We are all about to eat from the voicemail, the IP logs, the signature discrepancies, the threats, the photocopy in a grandson's jacket. He talks about love that gives and power that takes. He speaks of lines, the kind drawn too late and the kind that must be drawn anyway. This is not a family dispute, he finishes softly. This is a person drawing a boundary and being punished for it. The law exists to hold that line when those closest to us won't. The judge calls a recess and disappears through a door like all. Decisions are made in some secret back room where the air is warmer. I sit. Rosa touches my shoulder. "Breathe," she whispers. When we rise again, the judge's face is the same as before, but the air has changed. It's taut, expectant, the hush before rain. Having reviewed the exhibits, testimony, and arguments, she says, voice level and firm, the court finds no credible evidence that Mrs. Taylor executed a valid power of attorney. The court further finds that the document presented demonstrates characteristics consistent with forgery. Accordingly, the petition to compel control over Mrs. Problem, Taylor's finances is denied. I don't realize I'm gripping the bench until I feel the ache in my fingers. The judge continues, words like careful nails hammered into a frame. Any attempt to use the contested document is enjoined. Costs are awarded to the respondent. Claire's mouth opens, then shuts. Daniel looks at the floor. Rosa exhales a sound that might be a laugh or a sob. David lets out the smallest breath, as if he'd been holding the walls, up with his lungs, and can finally set them down. And then the sound I will remember for the rest of my life, the judge's gavel, a clean, decisive knock on wood. It ricochets through my chest, bright as a bell. The gavel struck the desk, and to me, it was the sound of freedom. When I stepped back into my house, the silence hit me harder than any gavel. The courtroom had been loud with shoes shuffling, papers rustling, lawyers sparring. Clear, there was nothing. Just the creak of the old floorboards as I closed the door behind me. I dropped my handbag onto the chair and lowered myself into the armchair by the window. The room felt strangely foreign, as though it belonged to someone else. I should have felt victorious, triumphant even. I had stood in court, faced my own son and his wife, and won. But instead, an emptiness spread through me, wide and hollow. My eyes landed on the basket beside the chair, half filled with yarn. On top lay an old scarf, blue, soft, the one I had knitted years ago for Claire after Thomas was born. I lifted it slowly, the wool cool against my fingertips. Threads of memory unspooled with it. I remembered sitting up late at night, lamplight pooling on my lap, Richard already gone from this world, and me stitching warmth into every loop of yarn. I had imagined the scarf wrapping my family in safety, binding us closer together. I thought love could be woven into cloth. That generosity would keep them grateful, close. Now the scarf was just cloth, the memory of that hope, a ghost. I pressed it to my face, and for a moment I could smell old winters, the faint trace of baby powder, the echo of laughter that wasn't bitter yet. My chest ached with the weight of it all, the years I'd spent giving, the decades of sacrifice, the betrayal that followed. The clock ticked loudly on the mantel. Time moved, steady, indifferent. That night, sleep didn't come easily. I lay awake in the dark, the house creaking softly around me, shadows stretching across the ceiling. Victory should have tasted sweet. Instead, it tasted like ash, like something burned down to nothing. I won, I told myself. I am free. No one owns my name, my bank account, my dignity. But as I lay there, a question rose from the pit of my stomach and would not leave. I won, but does freedom mean happiness? The silence gave me no answer. In the early hours, I rose and wrapped that old scarf around my shoulders. It hung heavy, but not the way chains do. Heavy like memory, like lessons carved into the skin. I sat by the window, watching the faintest blush of dawn creep over the roofs. The world was the same, but I was not. For the first time, I could breathe without waiting for the phone to ring, without fearing another envelope in the mailbox. The air in the room was still, sharp, honest. I closed my eyes and whispered into the quiet. Freedom is sometimes an empty room, but at least it is a room without chains. The house felt too large after the trial. Every corner echoed with memories I didn't want to carry anymore. The arguments at the doorway, the tears shed into pillows, the nights I sat up knitting for people who only saw me as an endless supply. The walls still stood, but the warmth was gone. One morning, I walked from room to room, touching the backs of chairs, the worn banister, the kitchen counter where I'd once rolled cookie dough with Thomas. Each touch felt like a farewell. By the time I reached the front porch, I knew. I listed the house for sale. Within 2 months, it was gone. Keys handed to a young family with bright eyes and small children, chasing each other up the steps. I wished them joy as I closed that chapter. I moved to a small town by the sea, a place where gulls cried over the waves and salt clung to the morning breeze. My new home was a modest cottage with white shutters and a porch that looked out onto the water. The first night I slept there, I left the window open. The sound of the tide pulled me into sleep, soft, steady, forgiving. Here, life began again. At first, I simply unpacked my yarns and needles, setting them in a sunny corner. Knitting had always been my comfort, my quiet rebellion against loneliness. I knitted scarves, shawls, and blankets as the ocean rolled beyond my window. Then Rosa, who still called every week, suggested something daring. Why don't you sell them online, Margaret? People would love them. Handmade, real, filled with heart. I laughed at first. Me? An online businesswoman at 70? But curiosity got the better of me. With David's help, lawyers apparently know a thing or two about websites. I set up a small shop. I called it Ocean Threads. Orders trickled in, then poured. Customers wrote messages. This scarf feels like a hug. I've never worn anything so warm. DV photos came in of children wrapped in my blankets, couples walking hand in hand under shawls I had made. By the end of the first year, I looked at my bank statement in disbelief. Over $50,000 in sales. More money than I'd ever earned in my years of scraping by. And it came from something that was mine alone. Born from my hands, my vision, not from sacrifice demanded by others. But more than money, it brought me connection. Messages turned into friendships. Customers became regulars, sending me holiday cards and stories of how my pieces had become part of their lives. I created a rhythm for myself. Mornings began with a walk along the beach, gulls circling above, the sand cool beneath my shoes. I'd carry a thermos of coffee, sipping slowly, light as the sea breeze. My afternoons belonged to yarn, to colors and patterns, to the gentle click of needles that now meant freedom instead of burden. One morning, I caught myself smiling at the simplest thing, lifting my mug of coffee. At the beginning of this story, the phone in my hand had felt like a weight of 1,000 pounds. Now, this small cup was light, effortless, a symbol of how far I had come. Sometimes, at night, I thought of Daniel, of Claire, of Thomas. I wondered where they were, what choices they made after the trial, but I didn't chase the thought. Their absence was no longer a wound, it was a scar, and scars don't bleed forever. Instead, I poured my love into new places. I donated blankets to shelters. I taught knitting at the community center. I found laughter in the company of neighbors who asked nothing from me but friendship. And slowly, I stitched myself into a new life, one where I was not reduced to a wallet or a signature, but recognized as a whole woman, strong and free. Sometimes I stand on my porch at dusk, the sky painted with pink and orange, the waves carrying secrets I no longer need to keep. I wrap a shawl around my shoulders, one I made for myself, and I feel its warmth not as a chain, but as a promise. I whisper into the salt air, almost smiling. I used to knit scarves for others. Now I knit the fabric of my own life. If you've stayed with me until now, you already know more of my story than most people ever will. I've told you about the years I gave, the lines I failed to draw, the betrayal that nearly broke me, and the moment I finally stood up for myself. It hasn't been easy to put these words down, to admit out loud that even at 69, I was still learning how to say one small but powerful word, no. So let me speak directly to you. If you have ever felt taken advantage of by family, by friends, by anyone who mistook your kindness for weakness, please remember this. You are allowed to set boundaries. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are not selfish for saying enough. And you are never too old to change the story you're living. I did it at 69. You can do it at whatever age you are right now. I won't pretend it's simple. The hardest part of my journey wasn't facing a courtroom. It was facing myself. It was looking into the mirror and admitting that I had let my fear of losing love keep me chained. It was telling my reflection, you are a person, not a crying wallet. And then choosing day after day to believe it. Now I want to ask you something. Imagine yourself in my shoes. Imagine someone you love demanding more than you can give, holding affection hostage until you hand over pieces of yourself. Would you have the courage to say no? Would you draw the line, even if it meant standing alone? That is the question I leave with you, because the answer doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to you. And if my story has touched you, if it has stirred even a flicker of recognition or strength, I ask for something simple. Share it. Leave a comment. Tell me what you would have done. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine. Real lives where struggle meets choice, and choice leads to change. These aren't fairy tales, they're truths. Rough-edged and sometimes painful, but always human. Your voice matters here. When you share, when you respond, you remind people like me that our stories are not shouted into a void. You remind others who might be suffering quietly that they are not alone, that someone else has walked the road before them and come out the other side. So here I am, a woman who once thought her only worth was measured in how much she gave away. Telling you this with all the certainty I've earned, my story closes here, but perhaps it is the beginning of your freedom.